St. Joseph Hospital was opened on May the 4th, 1869. Three sisters came from Hessen Castle. Sister Rose was the superior and administrator. Sister Henrika and Sister Matrona. The last two sisters were both nurses. They both did nursing within the hospital, but also home nursing. 5 are buried here in Fort Wayne. 1 is buried in Donaldson. 1 is buried in England, and Sister Rose is buried back in Germany. So May the 4th, 1869, the first patient was admitted. That year, 20 patients were admitted to the hospital. The sisters tell the story that there was times when they would come from doing home nursing and wanted to go to bed, but found that there was a patient in their own bed. So they had to find somewhere else to go. The sisters did a lot of begging for the care of the patients. They went around different areas and tried to get food and the like. They also held raffles to raise money. They had watches and land and animals and all kinds of things that they raised money with. The hospital was annexed to the city in 1900. So until 1900, we weren't even part of the city, and now here we are in the middle of the downtown area. So how the city has built up around the city, around the hospital, and that it has always been an anchor within the city of Fort Wayne, and continues to be that today, I think. The mission has always stayed the same. It's been the mission of the Poor Handmaids, and has continued even after the sale 3 times.
Even when we talked about financial issues, the motivation was that we have a mission, and we can't complete our mission if we are not fiscally sound. And it impressed me that our mission of service was, from their viewpoint, what drove the business, and not that the business drove the mission.
The sale of the hospital, the sisters took part of that money and put it in their own foundation, but then gave that money to St. Joseph Community Foundation, which had been established, which we raised money for previously, but then that funded it for quite a large sum of money.
A couple summers during high school, I worked here at St. Joseph Hospital and delivering food to the patients and helping out around the kitchen those 2 summers, and helping out in the hospital when they had other needs.
I was born in this hospital. I've worked in this hospital before going back to medical school. I was educated by the Poor Handmaids, and so when I came back, this is my primary hospital of work.
The sisters, I think, were very gentle, and we're also always thinking about the patients and how best to serve the patients, and that was, they were always stressing when we took the food up, you have to get it up there right away. You want the patients to be able to have their hot and cold food, and so it's not lukewarm, and you want to be able to help them to get well. So, I mean, that was a big influence the sisters had, I think, on me.
My junior and senior years were really capped by having Sister Maris, who was a dear friend through the years, and a lot of the learning of trigonometry and calculus that served me well in my college years came from Maris. She made it fun. She never took any of our shenanigans seriously. At one point in time, we had the whole class chanting cosine, cosine, sine, sine. Throughout the years, her code word with a lot of her students would be cosine, cosine, and she'd say sine, sine. And when Maris left some of the teaching, and I know she spent a lot of time here at St. Joseph, when I was in residency, someone would see her and they said, have a message from Maris, and it was cosine, cosine. I go, well, sine, sine. And so that was our salutation. Even from the mother house, Sister Carol would bring back the message, or Sister Julianne or Sister Conrad would cosine, cosine, sine, sine. And it was just, we all knew that it was a message from Maris.
I'd go to 6:30 Mass at St. John's, And they had not a mother house, but a house around the corner on Harrison Street. And in the morning, I would see him. At that point, there was about five poor handmaids, and they were faithfully, they'd go to Mass, they'd be here at 6:15, and I'd get there at about 6:35 after Mass had started. And it was humbling to see their commitment and their faith. And to know that as soon as they left Mass, they were coming to St. Joe to work, and always cheerful, always ready, willing, and able to serve. And I mean, it was a privilege to know them and have some interaction with them. It was great.
One of the first sisters I really got to know well was Sister Mary Conrad Kirchhoff. And Sister Mary Conrad inspired many, many people. And, for me, she really helped me have the courage to reach out and to be hearts and hands of Christ and not to be afraid to go out, try that, and very empowering.
Bishop Darcy was bishop of our diocese. He had to, while he was gravely sick, he had to come to the hospital, and he was brought to St. Joseph here, and he was here for 3 or 4 days. And I know when he was in the hospital, he was struggling with some of the pain of his illness, and he asked for the crucifix to be taken off the wall, and he wanted to hold it. And so he did. He was holding it, and he held it all night, and he slept that way. And then when he was dismissed from the hospital, he didn't want to let go of the cross, and they said, and the nurses said, "Oh, that's all right, you can take the cross with you." So he took the cross with him home. So, that was just a very important thing, and I think, I'm sure there are other patients who those icons are very meaningful and helpful to their life of faith during that time of illness and struggle.
Well, when I got married in 1956, the sisters could go out if they had another sister go with them, and of course somebody to drive them, because they didn't do any driving. So we had gotten married in the morning, and sister couldn't come out, so we decided that we would come. And it used to be that we had a morgue that was separate from the building out in the back, and there was parking back there. So we parked back there. It was an emergency room entrance as well. We parked back there and came in. My veil blew off in a puddle of water. Anyway, we came in to see Sister Etheldreda. She was such a nice person to work for, and we wanted to come down, and she wanted to see our dress and our bouquets and Jack and his tux and the whole bit,
Sister Carol has always been very, very close. I remember when she broke her leg, we were trying to get her home and trying to get her in the van. It was an interesting process, and both of us, I'm trying to help get her in, and because I don't remember which leg it was that she broke, but it was not good for trying to get her maneuvered and sitting in the vehicle, but she just said something about grab a hold and just get me in there, and that's what we ended up doing.
I had I had an occasion with my dad here at the morgue when one of my brothers died after was hurt in the service and died. The body was brought here, right out this back door here, and I remember we had a sister that was there for us, ministered to my dad and me at the time, and when somebody comes and loves you unconditionally and reaches out to you, it's spiritual.
One of the doctors I got to know when I was in high school, he was a Jewish doctor in town, and I know he told me one time that he said St. Joseph was the only hospital in town that would let him practice because he was Jewish. And he said these sisters have furthered my ability to doctor. And I think that willingness to reach across boundaries and to help others, I think is something that is very characteristic of the sisters, has been over the years.
I entered into the orphanage in 1956. I was 2 years old. people ask me, they think being an orphanage is strange, because I think the only recollection they have of it is the movies, you know. Annie is one of them, you know, and I think that's the concept that they have of it. They educated us, they taught us work ethics, they loved us. We swam, we boated, we marshmallowed, you know, we had bonfires, we had scavenger hunts. They've made sure that we had decent clothing and shoes. So, I mean, I have very fond memories, but all of it was a benefit to me and my brothers and sisters, because that's who we are today because of who they were to us.
I'm 90 years old. I'll start with my age, because we had a big celebration out of this world. It was wonderful. We 90 and then 70 years that I am involved as a sister.
She taught us etiquette and how to walk and how to talk and all those kind of things. She wanted us to be perfect ladies, and so she had classes like that for us. But I think one of my favorite stories is one on Meg Disler's CCD class. You should tell that story.
I was asked to have religion classes because they were getting ready for maybe First Communion or whatever that might be.
And the teacher was struggling to go and get the class in order. And Sister Julian in earlier years had been an elementary school principal, walked in front of the room, the class, and just...
And they all stood up and sat down and behaved like I don't know what.
And it was an amazing, and they just, her presence, and they felt her love and her sincere interest, and they said, told her a little bit, and they said, and you work for God, and you're the principal, and they were all, it was just fabulous.
She always could get anybody's attention, a good teacher. You know, I don't know about discipline so much. We weren't worried about discipline, but...
Years ago, I remember there was a sister that would just work nights in the hospital, and she would go around and visit patients at night after 10 o'clock. And she said that was really important because some patients were very fearful at night, they couldn't sleep, and they were very anxious, and she would just spend time with them, and that was really a really beautiful ministry that she had.
The sisters would make cookies during the holidays. And then our sister, to get doctors to come in and do their charts, she would send out postcards and she'd let them know that they had to get their charts done by a certain date. And if they came in and got all their charts done, they'd have apple pie or they'd have pumpkin pies or something like that there for them to eat.
There's 3 ministries active right now in Fort Wayne. Or in Allen County. There's Health Visions Fort Wayne, there's St. Joe Community Health Foundation, and there's Catherine Casper Place. All are doing different pieces to really, with very focused missions, of helping to keep that legacy alive.
I'm recognized for the work that we do here at the hospital, but it's really the employees who have done so much. It's there, and people will say it to me, there's something about St. Joe. And I don't know that they can necessarily define it, but there's something about St. Joe, and I know that's what it is. And I think it's because of the spirit and the mission that people really have integrated in their lives.
But it is interesting to me that when they just instilled the last Sister Carol and the current leadership of the Poor Handmaids, 2 bishops wanted to be there, and I believe like 10 priests. But it was a celebrated mass with 2 bishops really wanting to be there because they've seen how the Poor Handmaids have inspired their diocese. And it's very rare to get 2 Indiana bishops in the same location to celebrate a mass. But it was out of respect, and many, many priests who've worked with the Poor Handmaids in different parishes and seen the impact of what they've been able to help them do. So it's a very live, but it's a transitioning piece. In Vatican II, it empowered a lot of lay people to take on roles that were historically done by religious communities. The Poor Handmaids, as a result, in the U.S., really started working more closely with lay community members to continue their work, so that their work and their legacy becomes stronger, but not by just avowed community. And I think Sister Mary Conrad Kirchhoff, when I first met her, encouraged me and said, Meg, our job is, and she said, your job is to be the hearts and hands of Christ. And I know that they have empowered many people in the hospital, in the community, who have worked with them and taught them their legacy of caring for the most vulnerable, treating all people with dignity and respect, and doing that in your daily life.
You know, and I think the biggest thing about Poor Handmaids is that we do many things, and we work side by side with people, and we're also ready to move on when other people can take over for whatever the ministry is. The mission continues to be the same. The whole idea of extending the healing touch of Jesus to give high quality, cost-effective care with a heart for the poor.
And we owe them a debt of gratitude and a commitment to carry on their tradition.
And it's really fitting when you think of their logo, which is a cross dipped in water with ripples of water going out. It's how do you build those ripples and legacy? There may not be here physically, but how many people have they empowered who've worked alongside one of the Poor Handmaids? So while the sisters aren't here physically, they're very alive here. Their legacy is alive. And the challenge is, how do we all keep that legacy of wonderful goodness?
You can't erase them because, you know, their history is so colorful and it is so broad spectrum for education and for health care and for their foundation that they offer now. So they still actively continue to still be a part of Fort Wayne. I don't think you can take them away because just because their physical presence is gone, they still remain here. I mean, I'm one of 5 in just my family. I don't know how many others are out there that still are in the Fort Wayne community. They're never gonna forget them.
It's kind of humbling for me at times to sit and listen to people who are so dedicated to our ministries and who so firmly believe in it. But it's also wonderful to be part of those ministries because that's how the Poor Handmaid spirit's going to continue. It doesn't need one of us to be there to be a Poor Handmaid ministry.
But if their ministry is still alive, they're alive. But the growth of the Poor Handmaids in other parts of the world is very exciting. I mean, in Africa, in India, in Mexico, in some of those more developing countries where the governments aren't so strong in taking some of those other roles, you'll see Poor Handmaids very vital and alive.
The younger members are in the third world countries or in the developing countries. And the countries that have had Poor Handmaids for a long time are more assuming roles of leadership and helping them develop their own leadership skills within their countries.
So the Poor Handmaid ministry around the world is really growing. So it's a very interesting piece. And I think some of the legacy is how do they maintain their work in their communities and then meet these needs on a global basis. Just like in 1868, the Poor Handmaids reached out from Germany at the request of Bishop Knoll, to come to Allen County. They're now getting these requests to come to Mexico. And they don't want to step away from these communities, but their resources are being pulled in those directions too. And it's important to reflect on the change, but it's a call to the community, those who've been blessed by it, to help pass it on. The power of greater numbers goes out. Again, their ripples are done and magnified. And that's really kind of the history of the Poor Handmaids, of all of those who've come here. We've walked many years challenging things that God put in front of us, and then He offers solutions and He offers new opportunities.
I don't know what the future will hold. It's hard to know at this point, but at this point, I'm okay. And I think the true thing is that we roll up our sleeves and work along side by side with people, and then when it's up and going, then we move on to start something else, and it continues without us. So I think that's true handmade spirit.